Can I prove that everything I believed about separation anxiety in dogs was completely wrong? Or have most of us misunderstood what dogs are actually experiencing when we leave them alone? For a long time, I thought separation anxiety was mostly about attachment. A dog loved the owner too much, became overly dependent, and struggled emotionally whenever that person left the house. And honestly, that explanation sounded believable at first. You see videos online of dogs crying at doors, destroying furniture, barking nonstop, pacing around the house, or panicking the second the owner picks up car keys. Most people immediately assume the dog is simply too attached or behaving dramatically for attention. But the more dogs I observed closely, the more I realized something far deeper was happening emotionally underneath those behaviors. Some dogs panicked before the owner even reached the door. Others reacted emotionally the moment shoes were picked up, work clothes appeared, or familiar morning routines suddenly started unfolding inside the house. It started feeling less like bad behavior and more like emotional anticipation. Then one experience completely changed how I understood separation anxiety. A friend of mine owned a rescue dog named Bailey who seemed calm most of the day whenever people were home. But the second departure routine started, everything changed almost instantly. The dog began pacing heavily around the house before anyone had even opened the front door. Once keys were picked up and shoes went on, Bailey's breathing changed, his movement became frantic, and his entire body looked emotionally overwhelmed long before the owner actually left. That moment stayed with me because it completely changed the way I viewed separation anxiety. The dog was not reacting to being alone itself. The dog was reacting to the emotional anticipation of abandonment before separation even happened. And once I realized that, the entire issue suddenly looked much more complicated. One thing many people misunderstand is that separation anxiety is rarely about stubbornness, revenge, manipulation, or bad behavior. In many cases, the dog is experiencing genuine emotional distress that feels very real from their perspective. That is why punishment usually makes the situation worse instead of better. Another thing that surprised me repeatedly was how differently separation anxiety appears from dog to dog. Some dogs bark nonstop and panic immediately after owners leave, while others slowly build anxiety over time and eventually become destructive, withdrawn, restless, hypervigilant, or emotionally shut down during long periods of isolation. Some dogs stop eating completely when left alone, while others obsessively monitor doors, windows, and household sounds for hours waiting for familiar people to return home. That variation matters enormously because many owners expect separation anxiety to always look dramatic and obvious when in reality some emotionally distressed dogs become unusually quiet rather than chaotic. One thing that changed my perspective completely was realizing how strongly routine and predictability affect emotionally attached dogs. Many dogs build large parts of their emotional stability around familiar household patterns, which means morning routines, departure habits, emotional consistency, and daily rhythms often affect canine behavior far more deeply than owners initially realize. This becomes especially obvious after major life changes. Moving homes, changing schedules, returning to work after long periods at home, relationship changes, or sudden disruptions in routine often trigger anxiety in dogs that previously seemed completely stable. One thing many owners do not realize is how observant dogs become regarding departure signals. Some dogs start reacting emotionally long before the owner leaves because they already recognize the pattern leading up to separation. A dog may notice specific shoes, work uniforms, keys, bags, morning routines, or even subtle changes in owner movement and timing long before humans realize how closely the dog is observing everything. And once those patterns become emotionally associated with separation, anxiety often starts building before the actual departure even happens. One moment that changed my perspective completely involved a dog named Charlie whose owners believed he simply hated being alone. But after observing him more closely, it became obvious the strongest anxiety actually happened during the anticipation phase before departure. Once alone, the dog eventually settled somewhat. But the emotional buildup beforehand was overwhelming. That distinction changed everything. One thing many owners underestimate is how emotionally exhausting chronic anxiety can become for dogs over time. Some dogs spend large portions of the day emotionally preparing for separation whenever routines start feeling familiar. That constant anticipation can gradually create hypervigilance, emotional exhaustion, overstimulation, and increasingly reactive behavior around departure cues. Another hidden truth many owners eventually discover is that separation anxiety often becomes worse when humans unintentionally create emotional unpredictability around departures and returns. Dramatic goodbyes, emotional greetings, inconsistent schedules, and chaotic routines sometimes increase emotional intensity instead of reducing it. That does not mean owners should become emotionally cold toward their dogs. But calm predictability often helps emotionally sensitive dogs feel safer long term. One thing that surprised me repeatedly was how much progress some dogs made once owners focused less on correcting bad behavior and more on helping the dog feel emotionally secure during periods of separation. Some dogs improved once departures became calmer and more predictable. Others improved once routine stabilized and the environment itself started feeling emotionally safer overall. Another major truth many people eventually realize is that mentally and emotionally fulfilled dogs often cope with separation far better than chronically overstimulated or emotionally neglected dogs. Exercise helps. Mental engagement helps. Structure helps. Predictability helps. But emotional security inside the relationship matters too. One thing that changed my perspective completely was realizing separation anxiety is often deeply connected to uncertainty rather than simple attachment alone. Many dogs are not panicking because they are spoiled. They are panicking because the emotional predictability surrounding their world suddenly feels unstable whenever trusted people disappear. That distinction matters enormously. Another hidden truth is that some dogs are naturally more emotionally sensitive than others from the beginning. Genetics, early life experiences, instability during puppyhood, abandonment history, inconsistent environments, and traumatic experiences can all influence how emotionally secure dogs feel during separation later in life. This is one reason some dogs handle alone time relatively well while others struggle intensely even inside loving homes. One thing dogs constantly reveal is that separation anxiety is rarely simple. It is emotional, deeply relational, highly individual, and strongly connected to how safe and predictable the world feels from the dog's perspective. As I delved deeper, I realized it stemmed from a place of profound connection. It became clear that separation didn't equate to loss. In fact, I discovered that temporary absence could enhance our bond, allowing for growth both individually and together. This revelation transformed my anxiety into appreciation, as each reunion felt richer, fueled by the understanding that love stretches across distances, making moments shared even more precious. The more I observed dogs closely, the more I realized many dogs struggling with separation are not trying to misbehave at all. In many situations, they are emotionally overwhelmed animals struggling to cope with uncertainty surrounding the people they trust most. And honestly, that moment opened my eyes to the complexities of their behavior and feelings. It made me appreciate their perspective. This newfound understanding transformed my interactions with them. I learned to be patient and empathetic, recognizing that beneath their anxious exteriors lay a deeply sensitive heart. This journey forged an unbreakable bond, fostering trust and love in ways I never thought possible.